Welcome to the Love of the Star podcast. I'm Bobby Bell, Dallas Cowboys insider for 105 through the Fan in Dallas, your radio flagship home of the Dallas Cowboys. Joined as always by former Super Bowl winning NFL scout Brian Broaddus. He is now the co-host of the G-Bag Nation, which can be heard 2 to 7 p.m. Central, Monday through Friday on 105 through the Fan in Dallas. He is also the pre- and post-game co-host on the Dallas Cowboys radio network. And Brian, you had quite the late night on Saturday into Sunday morning as we record this on Sunday evening after the Cowboys drop the game to the Seattle Seahawks 22-14, their second consecutive preseason loss. But it's good to get football back out there, even if it's really not any of these starters at all.
No, Bobby, it is good to see football around the league. It's it's good to kind of see that the California portion of training camp is now over, and things shift. The focus now shifts to our backyard and the Star in Frisco. Bad news, I'm sure you're going to get to from a roster aspect, but I wanted to say thank you for doing such a great job on our Cowboys pregame show on Saturday night. Appreciate your insight. I know everybody's excited to hear your thoughts when it comes to this football team. So, it was a long night. Went well into the morning, and we're here to talk about it today. So looking forward to it. Yeah,
we are. I'm glad you reminded me that the California portion of training camp is over, because that reminds me specifically of one question or one big storyline that I know occurred since we last talked, and I'm curious for your thoughts on it. And that was the big training camp fight. They got one in there on Thursday. It was a one-on-one between Brock Hoffman and Sam Williams. Sam Williams, a little bit of chippiness.
Are you trying to start a fight with me? Or is that what you're doing right now?
I'm not. I think we view things a little differently.
I think you detect something that happened on my show, the G-Bag Nation, where every one of those guys lined up, Wolchuk, Chiafalo, Dawson, all lined up against me when it came to training camp fights.
I don't. No, that's not even where I'm going.
I see what you're doing here. You're trying to draw me off sides. I get it.
I think we have a disagreement in terms of one critical aspect of it, which was, of course, we got the fight between Biadasz knocking over Sam Williams, and then it turned into a whole melee. And then a few plays later, it was Biadasz and Micah Parsons, and Sam Williams coming in and getting his shot in after that. I'm curious for your overall perspective on the brawl, but more specifically, I think you felt like Tyler Biadasz was more in the wrong for that scrap than Sam Williams. That's where I think we have a little bit of disagreement. I felt like Sam Williams was more to blame here. And I felt like Sam Williams, for all of his off-the-field concerns and questions and things like that, he is the last guy who needs to be out here escalating brawls. And when it's all dispersing, running over and saying, let's take the pads off, and pushing defensive linemen, fighting with Isaac Alarcon and things like that, and saying, no, get out of my way. Let's take the pads off. Let's see. That was the last guy I felt needed to escalate it anymore. So I was a little more on the Tyler Biadasz side, but I'm curious your general thoughts on the melee and what it indicates.
Okay, I'll play your game, Bobby, today. I'm not a big fan of training camp fights, and I'm not a big fan of training camp fights, especially when it involves teammates. And just my personal experience of training camp fights, especially when it's teammates, is that they could say things don't carry over, and you just never know. There's the fact. I felt like that. Yes, that Sam and Hoffman trying to walk away, Sam, kind of continue on, and then Biadasz, taking a run at him. And the reason I take offense to this is I felt like Hoffman's trying to go away. Sam maybe was going to get in another shot, big deal, just separate, move on. But the fact that he got dumped, and the way he got dumped, and the violence with which he got dumped, that is my worry. That is my worry, where all of a sudden it's shot to the shoulder, back, head, everything hits the ground. I mean, he got blindsided. And so now you're in a situation where, you take a run at a guy like that, you hit him that hard, you knock him down. The way he hits is awkward. Is there some other injury now to Sam Williams? Are we in a concussion syndrome thing or protocol? Shoulder injury, rib injuries, back injuries. You just don't know, what potentially could happen. Luckily nothing did escalate that way. But then the feelings afterwards. Now it's like, okay, we got to get our pound of flesh from Biotish. And here goes Micah Parsons going at it. And here's your best player swinging wildly at players all around him, trying to even the score. And I've been with teams before where things have carried into the locker room. And all of a sudden now you have guys divided, defensive players divided with offensive players. And it's a very tense kind of situation. Again, everybody afterwards, oh no, we're fine, we're all good. But when it's teammate on teammate crime like that, I got no use for that. I really don't, because like I said, potential injury for the actual fight, potential hurt feelings going into the locker room, division among the players, feeling like, well, I got wronged here. And what's keeping Sam Williams from going and taking a shot at Biotish in a meeting or something like that? I mean, and it didn't happen. But those are the things that I've seen where it carries over. You're in the lunch line and now there's words exchanged, about the situation. And it meant enough to Micah Parsons that he felt like he had to go even the score. And that's your best player going to even the score. Wayne Gretzky never finished a fight. I mean, but that's the biggest problem that I had with it. I felt like the injury potential and the hurt feelings and the evening the score, if in fact it doesn't ever get settled on the field, and then those feelings carry over to another practice, another situation. That's my biggest concern.
I don't disagree with you, Brian. So we're simpatico.
That was really long-winded, but I just felt like that. With Zach and Eric. Hey, I'm not against fighting, and Zach was talking about it in a way that it was. Well, it's good. It's good for the toughness of the team. It's good for. No, it's not. Now,
I think chippiness. I think competitive practices are. I don't think brawls are.
Man, football players are tough people showing up playing the game. You don't have to prove your toughness to play football. I mean, you're already tough. You're already tough going up there and lining up and playing. I just felt like that fighting was just. I just thought it was a huge waste of time. And if you're not a tough team, there are other ways to manufacture that toughness other than beating up on one of your own teammates.
Yeah.
That's what I've always believed.
I'm totally with you on it. We actually agree. I don't want to see anybody get hurt in the name of fake toughness. Like I said, you can have chippiness and competitiveness, and I think smack talk and maybe even a little pushing and shoving at the end of the play. That's normal. Outright brawls, I don't think do anybody any good.
No, and I'm okay with the smack talk stuff that we've seen it with Diggs and Dak, and everybody's kind of labeled that as, oh look, teammates don't respect Dak. No, it's just competitiveness, and that's cool. That part of it's cool, but the physical part where your best player is swinging wildly in a crowd
could break his hand.
And then you think about it, and I'm sorry, I'm getting to the age where I forget things at times. But we recently had in one of these fights, these camp fights, a coach have to go to the hospital. Coach gets hit in a wild fight, and now he's in the hospital. And I'm sure that team that lost its coach is probably sitting there going, well, was it totally worth it? Our coach is laid up in a hospital right now. So there's other ways to prove toughness besides having to take a run, a swing, anything at your own teammate.
Well, let's take a look at this game against the Seahawks, and you know what? Let's lead off with some toughness. Why don't we? And toughness, I think you can say, is something that Jalen Tolbert continued to show in this football game. Jalen Tolbert, for me, I don't know about you, Brian. We'll talk about a couple different things. Tolbert continued, in this game and the last game. Really, I feel like he was the highlight for me in this game against the Seahawks in terms of, I think you continued to see, okay, working back to the football, tracking the football, toughness, even on the kind of double clutch catch that he had, even the one that got taken away off the replay. I think you showed that, to me, was bigger on Cooper Rush than it was anything on Jalen Tolbert. So this was an instance again where I think a lot of the receivers shined. Tolbert headlining that, but Turpin had a couple of good things. It was nice to see Jalen Brooks making that fourth down catch, working back to the ball. That, what we saw in fourth down, is similar to what we saw in these training camp practices. You had Dontario Drummond making plays. Not a great night for Simi Fehoko. They tried to connect on that smoke work again, him and Will Grier. It bit him a couple times. So overall, your biggest positive out of this game, and I guess just thoughts specifically on, has Tolbert answered the questions you had for him heading into camp?
Yeah, Jalen Tolbert is your fourth receiver right now. No question about that. And, and he will fight once the season starts. I don't know how much competition you'll be able to have and to prove that you could be the third, but he is, and this really starts, this goes all the way back to the things that he had to carry in the 2022 season. He had to carry the shame of not performing to the level that we all believed he could. And, that's, he heard the word bust. He heard the words can't play. He heard the words need to get rid of, need to move on. He carried all that through an off season, and he made it a point to remake himself. And, whether it was reps in the DAC yard, reps on the field at, there at the Star, reps in maybe at a training facility that we don't know about. Maybe he was in another town running routes and working out and trying to make himself better. He is a confident football player. He's a better conditioned player. He's a more mentally tough player. For him, and it really, you could tell last week when he gets the push-off penalty right before the half. And what does he do? He comes back and catches the touchdown to finish the drive. Right then, that's when you saw that things for Jalen was going to be different. You saw it was going to be much different for him. And he was able to, put together some really good routes yesterday. He had the one drop, which I'm sure he wants back. I think there's going to be times where Jalen Tolbert is going to make absolute brilliant plays, and maybe there's going to be that one that you're like, oh no, he shouldn't have dropped that one. I just kind of feel that's how he is, but he's established himself carrying all that with him as the fourth for sure, and a possible third depending on what happens with Michael Gallup during the season.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. Now, we didn't see that on the South Alabama tape, that he was somebody who had focus drops or anything like that. But I think that is one thing you're right about, that occasionally there may be the frustrating play. I think that may just be part of his profile, is that that ball seemed to kind of get on him a little quick last night. Yeah. It's one he needs to make. Right. But, I think people are going to be able to live with that occasionally if we see the guy that we've seen out here in terms of tracking the ball deep, making tough catches, not afraid of going over the middle this year. He looked afraid going over the middle of the football field last year, and that doesn't appear to be the case this year. So that's a big plus. Overall, that's a big positive takeaway. Anything for you that stands out as, man, this was a troubling thing we saw last night? I know for me, the continued struggles of the offensive line in parts. I thought Austin Richards had a decent game at times. I got to tell you, I was really impressed with Alex Taylor Priolo in some of the reps that he showed. He looked like he moved really well for his size. Josh Ball was better last night than he's been, but specifically, there were a few different times where I noticed Brock Hoffman or Matt Farniok, two guys who this team likes a lot, struggling in this game. Your general thoughts on the offensive line and anything else that stuck out as, this wasn't the best?
Well, I feel like you've got things on course when you're talking about the offensive line. I will say this. I think that Matt Farniok is a better center than he is a guard. I feel like he's more comfortable playing center. And, we've seen him have problems with the snap, a couple of different things. Last night he had an early snap, that was kind of crazy that Will Grier had to dive on. But I think when you watched him play overall, he looks more comfortable playing center than he does guard, which is weird, but he does. I think you mentioned Awesome Richards. I'm not going to say I would be terrified if Awesome Richards had to play in a game, but I think there would be those moments where you'd say, okay, hold on to your rear, here we go, kind of a thing. And there might be some really good reps, and there might be that crazy rep like we saw, where he gave up the sack against Jacksonville. But it's not totally his fault. Will Grier continues to hold the football way too long for some of these guys, and they just can't hold up protection-wise. I felt like, though, that, you mentioned what, the things with Taylor Prelo. He is so long and so, he just doesn't have great strength. And you worry about a guy that tall, the way he moves. But, man, he held up pretty well, at the tackle spot. And again, I was pleased to see, that how that worked out. I think I continue to feel like that TJ Bass, I'm going to go on record and call him a gamer, Bobby. I don't think he's a great practice player. I think he's one of those guys, you get him in a game and he kind of understands how he needs to play. He's a physical player. And so those are the kinds of things that you want to see, from your guys. And I'll tell you another guy. I throw a lot of dirt on Josh Ball. And there were a couple of times last night where they ran the ball, behind him and Matt Waletzko, where they were able to get some movement at the point of attack. Josh Ball came off the ball last night like we had some purpose, like he was ready to play, like he was confident that, and he's not always going to get movement because I don't think he's the strongest guy. I just don't. And so, that was encouraging there. But overall, they've got to figure out, they got to figure out 6, 7, 8, and 9. They've got to figure it out. I think they're getting a little close. I'll say this, Bobby. Matt Waletzko once again with a subluxation.
Subluxation, yes.
I was trying to say that. I'm still tired.
Different shoulder this year. Different shoulder. And I'm not a doctor, but I think maybe genetics or the way he's built has something to do with this. If you've got a right shoulder, left shoulder, if you've got this problem, this might be a genetic or the way you're built type of a problem that you are subjected to potential problems. And it's not good for an offensive lineman to always deal with his shoulders popping out. When you reach and you push and you strain and and now that it's the other shoulder, this might be just genetics. The way that he's put together is going to limit, again, I'm not a doctor, but it's really strange how, it might be a physical issue that he has to deal with. Well, and it's been that outside shoulder each time, because last year it happened to the left shoulder when he was at left tackle, and this year it's the right shoulder when he's playing right tackle. So it's definitely been the outside shoulder 2 years in a row here. But that's definitely a concerning injury. You're listening to the Love the Star podcast. The Love the Star is an Audacy podcast. You can find it on the Audacy app or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Brian, we just mentioned the Matt Waletzko injury. I saw Todd Archer from ESPN had said that it's one they're not terribly concerned with. They did get 2 pretty big injuries, though, that were much more serious. 2 ACL tears. One, John Stevens Jr., the tight end who had really come on in the last couple weeks. But then the big one, the one that just is an absolute kick to the gut for this team, I think, is DeMarvion Overshown, the 3rd-round pick, the linebacker out of Texas, who we talked about it last week. Overshown, there were things to like about him, but I didn't necessarily feel like, Overshown's this diamond in the rough or some guy who's going to step onto the football field and make an immediate impact. We had gotten through camp and preseason, and it was one of those things where you started to get this sort of nervous energy when you'd watch him, like this feeling of like, is this real? Is he as good as he looks right now? Because he looked like a veteran. He looked like a 5-year veteran out there, a tremendous athlete, somebody with great instincts throughout these practices, throughout these, the first preseason game, and the handful of snaps he played on the first drive. He had 3 tackles, I think, in 6 plays last night before he gets hurt.
Playing against Seattle's ones.
Yeah.
That's the thing. That's the thing. And he, it really started for him in the OTAs and the mini camps when all of a sudden they were putting him in those green dot situations where they, put the green dot on your helmet and they make you call the defense, and here's a rookie and, you've seen him play a ton because you watched, Texas football. So the player. We saw him during the draft show. I know you, Aisha Morrison, Zach Wolchuk, Kyle Youmans, we all talked about him. We all had an opinion about him as a player and the potential for him. Converted safety, can run like the wind, plays downhill, might be a little too aggressive. The Cowboys clearly had a plan for him, and you nailed it. First 6 plays of the game, he's got 3 tackles. And that's what they're going to miss right now. They're going to miss a guy that has a nose for the football. And I guarantee you they're all sitting in their office right now thinking about how are they going to replace a guy that could have allowed Leighton Vander Esch to do something different in games. Could have allowed, could sub for Damone Clark. Could play, could bring him on a blitz, could play him in a lot of different roles. This guy is a finisher. I mean, that's what he is.
Yeah.
He's around the ball. He's a finisher. He's not going to let people run by him. He's not going to miss tackles, and that's just a, like you said, that is a gut punch because you could tell the more they practiced, the more they played, he was going to have a big role in what they were going to do defensively. And Dan Quinn and these coaches, they're now left, nobody feels sorry for you, as we always say, but now they have to figure out. Well, okay, what's the next plan of attack? Because we lost a guy that we had a clear vision for as a player.
It's funny, I've heard the story told before that you remember Adrian Peterson had signed with the Saints one year and was traded a few weeks into the season. I think it was to Arizona. But it was funny is that when Sean Payton had talked about it later, he said that they got into summer practices and they got into training camp, and that was the year Alvin Kamara was a rookie. And Sean Payton saw him practice and saw what he was on the field and immediately went, oh, okay, no, this is different than even maybe we thought he was. Like this is a different level. This guy is ready now. We've got to clear space for him. We got to get Adrian Peterson out of here. It had that sort of building buzz, it felt like, with DeMarvion Overshown, that even that they were very high on him as a player and everything else, it still felt like, oh no, he's ready now. He's ready to play football now at a consistent level. And not to say that he's the Alvin Kamara of linebackers, but it felt like DeMarvion Overshown had a chance to be a real contributor for the defense, a real impact player for them right away. I mean, am I overselling it? Do you think the vibe? Like this feels like a significant injury the way it would a veteran that they lost.
No, this is one of those there where this is where Dan Quinn is different than a lot of the defensive coordinators that have come through here in the last 10, 15 years for the Cowboys. These guys figure out roles for their players. They figure out like, okay, I could use this guy as a nickel linebacker, or I could use this guy as a dime linebacker, or wait a minute, I could put this guy at Mike linebacker and have everybody else rush because of the way he finishes, the way he moves, the way he plays, the way he has length. This guy had, and I don't think we're overselling this, but this guy had that when it was all said and done, like your week 12, they start talking about most underrated defensive players in the league, or and name the guys that should have been taken higher, that are playing at a very high level, and Overshown could very well have been one of those guys that, man, well, drafted in the 3rd round. God, he should have been picked, in the 2nd. Maybe he was a late 1. He had that kind of path that he was working on, and it really, a lot of it, initially it was like, well, he's going to be a really good special teamer. Okay, he went from like thinking really good special teamer to this guy could be a weapon on all downs. This guy, he might not come off the field. Yeah. The way that he was showing up at practices and how smart he was. And I'm talking like he's deceased, but in football terms, he's deceased for this year. He's not going to be available to you, and that's the shame of it, because Dan Quinn and these guys clearly had a plan for him. Clearly.
When we look at the linebackers that are left in this group, the guys behind, because at Leighton Vander Esch, there's always the chance that he's going to get hurt. Yeah, and Micah Parsons is somebody who's going to be asked to rush a lot. And so DeMarvion Overshown figured to be a big part of this defense and a big, insurance piece as well, given the way your other linebackers function. But when you look at the remaining linebacker depth, Damone Clark, Devin Harper, Jabril Cox, who do you feel most confident in stepping up? Who are they most going to need to step up now with Overshown down? Who, in a lot of ways, Overshown started to feel like your 3rd best bet at linebacker.
Yeah, absolutely, he did. I think you have the Leighton Vander Esch replacement in Damone Clark. That's that replacement. The problem you're running into now is you might have to scrap the ideas that you had for Overshown, because I don't see it in Jabril Cox right now. I don't know what's happened with Jabril Cox, and I don't know if it's because of the injury that he had. Is he lacking confidence? Is it something he just hasn't quite got over yet, or he's missed too much time? He's one of those guys that looks like, to me, he's playing like a half step slow. Where at LSU and stuff, he was one of those guys that was to the ball. We talk about his cover ability, things like that. But he looks like he's just slow reacting to plays at times. Yeah. And that's an issue. Now, we've seen Harper have some success. I would say right now, if you gave me the trust meter, I think I would have Harper over Jabril Cox on the trust meter right now. Yeah. This is a position that the Cowboys very well could be looking for depth at the final cut. The Cowboys. I think the Cowboys are going to trade for. I think they're going to trade for a big piece. This is just my thought, guys and gals. This is not me talking to Will McClay or anything like that. But I think they're going to trade for a big piece. I think the big piece might be on that offensive line, and then the claiming could be on linebacker depth. The linebacker depth could be the claiming, that like they see a guy that they, or two. I think the Cowboys, they usually, what you have to worry about is teams just fall in love with their players, and the Cowboys are guilty of this sometimes too.
Sure.
They fall in love with their team, and they don't want to make any moves or anything like that. But I think Will McClay realizes he's probably going to have to make a big move at offensive line. He's probably going to claim defensive guys. Defensive guys, probably linebackers is what he's looking at right now.
Yeah, and I think that linebackers is a big part of this, especially, we talk about Overshown, and Overshown's the bigger piece of this, but also Malik Jefferson was a guy that's been in the building now for a couple of years, and a guy who, they at least have some affinity for, in terms of he's stuck around here. He's been around the practice squad. He's been around the active roster. So that's somebody that they've liked, somebody that they've trusted. And that's another guy that's banged up right now. Just before we wrap up and we go over to some of these mailbag questions, Brian, anything else for you that stood out in this game? I know you and I both agree that maybe Will Grier did not. I think we differ from Mike McCarthy on that one. Mike McCarthy felt like Will Grier looked good, or maybe it was covering fire. I don't know. But was there anything else about this game that really stood out to you, good or bad?
Yeah, I think it was really unfortunate that there was a couple of times where they did have a chance to go win this game. They get the fourth down stop. They do a really nice job to get the ball back. And then Will Grier, they're driving the ball, and then Will Grier trying to fit the ball into Simi Fehoko. He rolls out, throws the ball across his body, throws it back in the middle of the field, intercepted, and Seattle scores on that. Thought it was unfortunate with the with the block punt, because I did notice that when Malik Davis was on the field on third down, or was going to be third down situation, they took Malik Davis off the field and put Rico Dowdle in there on third down as a blocker.
Yep.
So keep an eye on that. Now all of a sudden, okay, you got Rico. Well, Malik Davis had what I believe, again, just watching the All-22 from last week, there seemed to be a blitz pickup problem that he saw late. And, maybe it's on the line. I'm just saying he tried to clean up a mess, but he couldn't, that was Malik Davis. So now all of a sudden, now they're taking him out. They're putting other guys in for him. But Rico Dowdle, who's trying to, win him a spot as well. And Bobby, knowing these guys, they might go a way of keeping all four of these running backs.
I think that's totally possible.
To me, that they might not. They'll figure it out. I don't know what the situation's going to be with Hunter Lipke. I've been accused of being this Hunter Lipke fan, and I don't know where that all came. And I tweeted, I'm like, the state of North Dakota hates me from what I said about Hunter Lipke. So don't. I just don't know where he fits right now myself. But the Rico Dowdle miss on the wing on the punt team, because whoever the third back is that plays in the game is going to need to make up for the snaps that you're not going to get from Deuce Vaughn.
Right.
They tried Deuce Vaughn as the personal protector. He stepped up, he got hit, and then he got knocked down, and so it's something he's just not totally comfortable playing. He's not. He was a star at Kansas State. He didn't have to play special teams. This is completely new to him, what he's having to do. But the Will Grier, it's just unfortunate that mistake at the end. Even the pass he throws to Johnson, he puts that on target. Johnson's probably still running. That thing was going to be. I had a chance to score on that slant on third down. And then inexcusably on fourth down, what are you doing? It's just you're trying to evaluate your team, and you got a veteran guy, and I know he doesn't play. He hadn't played in a lot of NFL games, but he's a veteran quarterback that's been around. You can't take sacks. You can't hold the ball, and I get it. Mike's got to be positive about his guys. I get it. But I don't know how you evaluate, especially when I sit there and this is me having revisionist history maybe in the draft. My guy from Purdue, Aiden O'Connell is like lighting them up right now. Okay, this is the Brian Broaddus draft show I told you so thing, but Aiden O'Connell looks like a real damn player. And I think Mike McCarthy, to his credit, liked Aiden O'Connell. And see, to me, that's where I want to go. That's where I wanted to go. Like, okay, maybe you draft Aiden O'Connell, and all of a sudden he's the third, but he then develops. He's even better than what you have with Cooper Rush, and now you have a really solid backup type player. But I think Will Grier, I think he's a better player than that. But man, he did me no favors last night trying to evaluate my football team.
You are listening to the Love of the Star podcast. The Love of the Star is an Audacy podcast. You can find it on the Audacy app or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Brian, it is now time for our Dean Julia Love of the Star mailbag. And one area that we ignored of the game that got a lot of discussion, mainly for how little discussion maybe there was about him. And that's the Mazi Smith question. This one specifically from 777 Devin Boyle. Can we talk about Mazi Smith the whole time? Well, not the whole time, but we'll get to Mazi Smith. I felt like these first two games, similar to the practices, some good, some bad, just kind of inconsistent.
Yeah, you got any more thoughts than that, or are you just going to throw it at me?
No, I mean, look. I think you and I see it remarkably similar. That he's basically, when he's able to stay square, he wins. Too often, he's getting turned around. And he's, giving up gap integrity. He's giving up space. Too often his pad level gets too high, gets him blocked up, ends up on the ground. And that's been the case throughout these practices. That was the case in the first Jacksonville game. And that was the case here again against Seattle, where there were times where he was eating up space and he was, keeping linebackers clean. And then there were other times where he was getting turned around. Isaiah Stanback, I think, pointed out one of them where they got gashed for a pretty big run because Mazi Smith got turned. And so that's the kind of thing that you need to see. You need to see more consistent pad level and a more consistent anchor. Yeah,
the biggest issues with Mazi Smith is at Michigan, he plays in a system that was more read and then react. And now he's in a system where he plays react and then read. And so what happens to him is when he's bad with his hands, then that causes him problem. When Mazi's feet stop, that's a problem. Mazi's one of these guys, when you watch him and he's able to engage and keep moving, keep himself moving, he does fine. But what happens is he engages, he stops his feet, and then he gets turned. He's not forcing the blocker to have to carry him. And I mean, carry him in a way that, get into him and have to, push on him. He's given the blocker an out by engaging and then positioning himself because he's not moving his feet, you know, and that's when Mazi's bad. And it happens that he's, at Michigan. I mean, Will McClay even talked about this pre-draft. And I think AD, the defensive line coach, talked about it as well, that they were going to have to do something with his stance. They were working on his stance. And, you got Dan Quinn, who's a defensive line coach. You got AD. You got these guys that can work with him. And so that was, okay, cool. We're going to work on his stance, work on his, the base, make sure. But when you watch him play, when his feet stop, he struggles. And so they need to get him to get in more. And again, this is just 3 years of playing football at Michigan, where it was engage, read, and then go. Mm-hmm. Where here it's react and then read, and he's struggling with that right now. But I think his biggest issue is that he tends to get a little high because he gets a little tired. They're working on his conditioning for him by playing him in these games for a good length of time. They're getting him, they're getting him in condition, but they've got to work on those feet. Because like I say, when he's moving, he's hard to stop. He's just a powerful guy. But when he stops those feet, it's a battle, and then he gets turned and he's dead. And I mean dead in a way of dead on the play. But it's not something. I think that people, when you evaluate the position, the one technique, the nose position, sure, there's the Vita Veas of the world, and there's the Haloti Ngata's of the world, those mammoth, huge dudes that are athletes that move. And I think that's what we kind of all envisioned that Mazi Smith was going to be. But for 3 years, he played in a totally different scheme that he's playing in right now. And I think the learning curve on it has been a little tough on him. And that's how you get some good. And then when you're tired or you're long in the series, some bad.
Right. Next question here from Jay Veerman. Hunter Lipke at fullback or Sean McEwen at tight end 4?
Yeah, here we
go. Which
go.
would you prefer?
Yeah, see, this is where, and again, me personally, it was John Stevens over McEwen, and I haven't seen it with Hunter Lipke, and I know, again, the whole state of North Dakota, if you're watching this, I'm public enemy number 1 up there in beautiful part of the beautiful part. No, it's a beautiful part of the country. Love going up there. Loved it when I was in Wisconsin, and it's just a beautiful state. But I don't see the fascination right now with Hunter Lipke. I don't think he's doing enough to make me completely. And again, I'm not a Sean McEwen fan either. But it's going to come down. Yeah, it's going to come down to 4th tight end or him likely. And me personally, if 4th tight end, and we got into this discussion last night with Brad Sham, on the postgame show. There's some people, and I was talking with Todd Archer today too. There's people that kind of feel like that maybe, maybe you're tied in there. Maybe John Stevens was just really a practice squad guy. That we're making a lot more of that. But if it came down to one or the other, I would keep the 6th wide receiver for sure, is what I would do.
Yeah, Jalen Brooks.
I would. I mean, if you're thinking about 5 wide receivers, 4 tight ends, and or the 3 tight ends and the fullback guy, give me the extra wide receiver. Give me the extra wide receiver, because I just haven't seen it with Hunter Lipke. I'm sorry, North Dakota State guys. I'm really sorry about that, but it's just my eyes, And again, I'm doing radio and not scouting, so here you go.
Kyle Stahl asks, how close are we to these 2 realities, Brian? 1, Jalen Tolbert is worthy of bubble wrap for preseason game 3. 2, Jalen Tolbert taking away some snaps from Michael Gallup.
I think you're closer. I think you're closer to him being maybe a 3. If Michael Gallup doesn't play to the level that we've seen Michael Gallup play before, and Michael Gallup, when we interviewed him at training camp on 105.3 The Fan, the G-Bag Nation, 2 to 7, Monday through Friday, when we interviewed him, he even brought the notion that, man, I got to step up my game. That number, that 18, that 1-8's playing some football now. And he even brought that up. I think we're closer to him getting more opportunities that way than we are of him being a bubble wrap guy. I think he needs to still keep playing myself, Let him go out and have another good 5-catch, 48-yard game, against the Raiders this week and, figure it out from there. Make him as confident as you can going into this Giant game. But I think we're closer to that than we are a bubble wrap game.
Next question here from...
Am I right, or what do you think?
No. I think that... Look, there's an argument to be made that
you can answer these questions too. You could have other states hate you.
I know.
I don't have to be the only guy having people hate me.
He's confident. He's look. He's somebody who you're building his confidence. You've established that baseline now for his confidence and his level of play that you can feel good about. So part of me does wonder, okay, maybe it's best to just figure out this giant crop of receivers behind you, especially if you're not going to give Dak or anybody else the reps anyway. It might be to a point where you go ahead and just say, all right, let's rest him until we're done. But I also think that, yeah, if Michael Gallup shows the same sort of confidence issues that he had last year and that he hasn't,
looks like you got somebody, yeah.
Then you've got somebody that you feel comfortable with. Honestly, I mean, Jalen Tolbert was not brought in here. He was not drafted to be wide receiver number 4. You don't draft him in the 3rd round to be wide receiver number 4. So it's somebody that they want to step up, and that if he's able to step up, it's somebody they believe can be part of the top 3 rotation. And maybe they get to a point where they say, you know what, Michael Gallup, your money's not worth this. Or, you know what, Brandon Cooks, it was great to have you for a year, but we're going to go ahead and move on now. But I absolutely think that you can feel comfortable at this point with where Jalen Tolbert is. Last question here from Ezekiel. who showed upside at the start of camp, but over the past 2 games still hasn't shown up the same way. And, one of these answers might be, you could say Jalen Brooks, although Brooks, I think last night flashed a little bit. That 4th down catch was nice. That was some of what we had seen.
Mm-hmm.
The answer here might be Eric Scott. Eric Scott's been really good in the practices and not as good in the games.
Yeah, I think. Go ahead and finish this thing out. Talk about Eric Scott, because you got this absolutely right.
Yeah, and I think Eric Scott was better last night than he was against Jacksonville, just like Jalen Brooks was better last night than he was against Jacksonville, but it's still too inconsistent. And he's somebody who, you had pegged him as the right place, right time, nose for the ball type of guy, and that's where a lot of his highlights have shown up at camp. He's always right there for a ball deflection, or it just happens to the crooked throw sails into his arms. He's the guy who's had that benefit a lot, and in these games he's shown a little bit of susceptibility, and some of these veteran receivers, some of these guys who have played a lot of football, have exposed him as maybe a little more raw than you had initially thought. And so I know we talked to David Hellman for our Love the Star newsletter, which we do for 105 Through the Fan, and David said, look, part of me wonders if we've all just bought into a little bit of hype with Eric Scott, and is he totally secure even as a roster spot? Now, they traded up for him. I still think they'd like to keep him here. I still think Dan Quinn thinks very highly of him. But Eric Scott is one who probably stands out. I think Wanye Thomas has been better in the practices than he has been in the games. But that's another guy that I think they like and would like to see show up. But those are the ones that probably stand out the most.
You completely nailed it. So I'm glad you now have the state of Mississippi mad at you for that comment you made about.
That's fine. I've built up some credibility with the state of Mississippi for my Dak Prescott takes over
there
the years.
There you go. That's good. You do have a lot of credibility in the bank on that one.
I can throw him a Southern Miss every now and then.
Can I throw a name out there that might not fit into your category you're talking about, but I kind of feel like that I haven't seen it. I saw it last season, but I haven't seen it this season.
Sure.
Israel Mukuamu.
Yes. Yeah. Now, part of me wonders, is Mukuamu just dealing with is he still dealing with the lingering effects of the injury?
No question. And that's my hope. But I was really, really like what I saw at the end of last year. I had really high hopes for him. And I haven't seen it like I saw it at the end of last year. So if you're talking about a start but at a different point, that's where Israel Mukuamu is for me. I saw why weren't they playing him last year? Why were they claiming guys off the street and plugging him into play? And when you had this guy that was ready to go.
Yeah.
I want to believe that things are different for Israel Mukuamu. I want to believe that.
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't know if it is. I'm hopeful.
One would hope that's just a lingering effect from the injury. That does it for us here today on the Love the Star podcast. As always, you can follow myself and Brian on Twitter. I'm at BobbyBeltTX. He is at Brian Broaddus, and that's Brian with a Y. So make sure you get that right. Cowboys have another preseason game, their final one, coming up against the Raiders this weekend. We'll have more looking ahead to that as they return to Frisco for practices this week. For Brian Broaddus, I'm Bobby Belt. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll talk to you guys next time. Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. If you want to see more of our videos, be sure to check out our playlist and let us know what you think in the comments below. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media to stay up to date on our latest updates. Links are in the description. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.